As you may have all noticed from the discussion or the title that I put out, we're going to be discussing cleanliness and Ācamana. How to implement standards of cleanliness at home, and also how to practice Ācamana. And as you may be aware, cleanliness is one of the things that Srila Prabhupada emphasized above anything else in Deity worship. There's many things he spoke about, but if you look at all the letters he wrote, well, not all, but the vast majority of the letters he wrote, etc., you'll find that, and when he spoke about it personally, when he spoke about it in classes, etc., the thing he spoke about the most was the need for purity, the need for cleanliness. So that's what we're going to be covering in today's session. And what we'll do is we'll look at, first we'll start off by looking at the Ācamana procedure, and we'll understand what the Ācamana procedure is, how to do it, when to do it, and where to do it. And look at different types of Ācamana. You'll see in ISKCON there are different ways that Ācamana are done. And also just have a look at the word Ācamana itself and the different meanings that Srila Prabhupada gives in different places to the word Ācamana. And also, for those of you who have visited other temples, you may have seen there's different ways that priests purify themselves. So that's going to cover a fair bit of our time. And then in the last, I guess, about a third, we'll discuss a little bit about purity and cleanliness at home, how to practice, or what, not necessarily practice, but what are the important elements of cleanliness that we need to implement at home, but especially when we're doing Deity worship, but just in general, because one of the principal elements of being a Vaishnava is to cultivate purity. There's a really nice purport in the Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter where Srila Prabhupada explains that this is without cleanliness it's not possible to make spiritual advancement. So cleanliness is an intrinsic part of spiritual evolution, because we're helping to purify the body, but also we're purifying the consciousness and ultimately purifying the self. So yeah, and we'll go over some, we'll look at the different divisions of purity, and we'll also look at some personal cleanliness standards, things that you can practically implement at home. Okay, so just a little bit of a recap of the previous class. You may remember that we discussed about inviting the Lord into your home, and what sort of deities could be worshipped, whether you worship pictures or three-dimensional deities, what the deities are made of, whether they're brass, they're marble, they're painting, whatever. And also looked at different types of altars to see that actually there's no set standard of what an altar should look like. The altars come in many different shapes and sizes, and you'll see that different homes, according to their circumstances, are going to have a different type of altar. Okay, so without further ado, we'll get into this. So I want to start off by looking at Ācamana and how this important procedure assists us in deity worship. Then we're going to go over to how to perform the Ācamana procedure. Now, I've also uploaded a video, or actually Jayananda has uploaded a video to the ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry YouTube channel on how to do Ācamana. I'll also be playing that video here, but I encourage you to access that YouTube channel and to watch the video in your own time. Obviously not now. And it's pretty simple. It's just the basic Ācamana, where you're sipping water 3 times. And there's also, if you're interested in, there's the more elaborate Vaishnava Ācamana there, which includes all the different mudras where you touch various parts of your body and things like that. Then after that, we're going to explore what I consider to be the single most important item in deity worship, cleanliness. We'll look at items which are essential and also items which are helpful. And I want to sort of just go over a little bit how to practically apply cleanliness at home and personal cleanliness standards that I would encourage you all to implement. Okay, so let's move on with that. Okay, so Ācamana. Now, as I mentioned, there's a document which I'll be sending out to you all. I'll also upload it to Facebook as well to the ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry Facebook page. And that document is called Sipping Water for Purification, and you know, the Sanskrit term for that is Ācamana. And it begins by explaining that actually, Ācamana is not just some Vedic ritual that's for people who are, caught up in all the rules and regulations, because actually we see in the Bhagavatam that the gopis also performed Ācamana, sipping water from their right hand to purify themselves before doing spiritual activities. This is explained in the 6th chapter of the 10th canto. So I'm just going to read some excerpts from there. Now you see we've got one slide up here, and it basically is explaining sipping water and chanting mantras. So you have water in your hand, like I don't know if you can see me on screen there, but you put some, like, I'll go into a little more detail later, but you sip water, you put water in your hand, a small spoonful of water in your hand, you look at the water and you chant the mantra. And the idea is, as it describes in this article, it says very simply, Ācamana, or sipping water, is a means of purification. That's the whole point behind Ācamana, is to become purified. Actually, I just realized something. Let me change this microphone. Can you hear me okay? I'm not sure. I hope you can hear me anyhow. Yeah, so it helps us to achieve physical purity, obviously, but also a deeper purity, because we're actually sipping water with mantra. So it's also a deeper type of purity. Now, the next thing we can look at is, how is it done? So the idea, as I was explaining before, is you cup some water in your hand, you look into the water, and you chant the mantra. Now, the idea is you're infusing the mantra into the water. Then this has the effect of actually not just purifying the water, but spiritualizing the water. So, the water then, because the Lord's name is in the water becomes non-different from Krishna. And this helps us to be, and then we sip that water, so we're ingesting the holy name into our body, and then we also become purified by that act. Okay, so yeah, it's a means of. So the general process follows: you look into the water, cupped in your right hand, chant a mantra, direct it into the water, and then sip the water. And as I was saying, there's many different types of Ācamana, but the basic method's the same in all types of Ācamana. Okay. So how to do Ācamana. Okay, the next thing we can look at is when to do Ācamana. Now, in this article that I'll send out, it explains that devotees should perform Ācamana to achieve physical and mental purity before performing spiritual activities such as applying tilak, chanting Gayatri, chanting japa, performing puja and homa, observing a vrata, taking prasad, reading or reciting shastra or mantras, and meditating. So generally, you'll see that Vaishnavas may not necessarily do Ācamana before all of these items, but you'll see that many Vaishnavas will do before some of these items, such as putting on tilak. It's quite common to see devotees living in a brahmachari ashram, for instance, especially those who are more senior or more Brahminical, they will do Ācamana. What they'll do is after they bathe and dress, then they'll do a simple Ācamana, then put on tilak, then chant Gayatri. So it's quite a common thing that you'll see devotees doing that. Certainly before doing puja or doing a homa, one would also do Ācamana. And then less common that you would see devotees, for instance, doing Ācamana before taking prasad. Sometimes you might see devotees before reading or reciting shastra and mantras, they will do it. But then, as you'll see later on, Ācamana has different definitions, and it can mean as simple as washing your hands. So it's always encouraged that before you touch Shastra, for instance, because the Shastra is considered non-different from Krishna, that we would wash our hands before touching Shastra, especially if the hands may have been touching something unclean. Then there's also a recommendation in various scriptures to do Ācamana after rising from bed, after bathing, after dressing, after touching your lips, after eating, after going to an impure place, spitting or coughing, speaking improper words, touching something impure, and returning from a journey. one may perform Ācamana twice before performing a homa, chanting Gayatri. So he gives a few other ideas there. But then this second group of items, it's more that you would just at least rinse out, you know, like when you rise from bed, you would rinse your mouth. After eating, you would rinse your mouth. After touching your lips, you would wash your hands. So when we look at the different meanings of the word Ācaman, then this becomes consistent with you know, normal practice or normal expected practice for a Vaishnava, is that, you know, you would you know, cleanse yourself after doing any of these things. But as we see, you know, it's quite common, at least in Australian society, is that, you know, people will eat something and they'll just wipe their hands on their pants and just go about their business, or they'll go to the bathroom and they'll come out without washing their hands. But in Vaishnava culture, one of the prime aspects of Vaishnava culture is purity or cleanliness. So it's very important for us to learn, as we're evolving in Vaishnava culture, is learn how to be clean. And this will greatly assist us in our spiritual evolution. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, now this is quite an interesting slide. I might just go a little bit slow because I was informed last week that the slides don't come up as quickly. Okay, so an interesting point there. A clean place is a safe place. Now, isn't that so true now? We see that with what's going on in the world right now, one of the things that most experts are saying is cleanliness is very, very important. And the thing is, we should already know this in Vaishnavism. We should already know that, you know, the importance of cleanliness is so, or the value of cleanliness is so important in our spiritual life. Yet, unfortunately, we don't always recognize that. So one thing I have been encouraging devotees in temples around the world, and just in devotees that I interact with during this period of pandemic, is you really need to focus on improving your cleanliness. I'll tell you a little bit of a funny story. My wife and I were in Vrindavan, going back a few years now, probably 7 years, 8 years, and there was a bout of what they call their pink eye, or which we know as conjunctivitis, getting around. And everyone was wearing sunglasses because they had the conviction that, you know, that this conjunctivitis was spread by looking at someone who had conjunctivitis. You look at someone with conjunctivitis, you've got conjunctivitis. But, you know, we knew that actually it was a very, very, very highly touch sensitive, touch contagious disease. Just by touching your eye, you touch someone else, they touch their eye, they've got it. You know, very simple thing. Or you touch after touching your eye, you touch some surface, someone touches that, they've got it. So we were just very, very clean, and we didn't get conjunctivitis. So the idea is that in all these circumstances, you know, and it's the same as contamination. Contamination is spread by touch. So if you touch something that's impure, you become impure. So the idea is if you touch something impure, you just, cleanse yourself, and then you remain pure. Yeah? So the same thing here is because we're performing an activity to purify ourselves, the place where we perform the Ācaman should also be pure, because what's the point of trying to purify yourself in a place which is impure? Prabhupada uses this phrase, or actually the Bhagavatam uses this phrase, akunja sochara, whereas the elephant, you know, he goes in the water to bathe, and, you know, you see them, they throw water all over the place, they have a grand old time in the water, and then they come out of the water, and what do? They throw dirt all over their body. So they're not actually, achieving anything there. So in the same way, if you perform Ācaman, or if you do deity worship in an impure place, you know, it's not going to have the same benefit. So the place where we perform Ācaman should be pure. And that has obviously gross aspects, but also subtle aspects. It means it should be free from hair, bones, ash, or any other impure item. But also, you know, generally we do Ācaman sitting on the floor. You wipe the floor before you do the Ācaman. And then you wipe the floor after you do Ācaman to make sure that, you know, there's not a wet floor or a wet place for anyone to stand in. And especially if you're doing it in a place where you have marble floors or stone floors or anything like that, often you'll find that when you have water on the floor in such a circumstance, it's very, very slippery. So, you know, to protect others as well as yourself, ensure that the floor is dry after you after you've done Ācamana. All right, so let's see what else. Yeah, what water? Okay, so we have here, what water should I use for Ācamana? And as it explains from Shastra, the water should be cool, should be fresh, should be without bubbles, without foul odor or taste. You know, sometimes when you take water from different streams and things, it might have bubbles in it, it might have mud in it, things like that. So you have to be cautious to ensure that the water is clean and it doesn't smell bad. Like sometimes different wells, I know, for instance, in Western Queensland, the water that comes out of the wells there, they've got a very, very strong, what was it, sulfur smell to it, very, very strong smell. So better if you can avoid using water like that. And also, it shouldn't be touched by fingernails, because actually the fingernails are considered to be impure. The hair is considered to be impure, or any other impure item, even like skin when it flakes off, things like that. These things are all considered to be impure. So better to avoid using these things if you can. And rainwater also is considered to be in the mode of passion, so it's better if it's not used. But then there's a comment given by Sridhar Swami on this, where he mentions that if rainwater's been sitting for 10 days and you have no other option, then it's okay to use. So, you know, if you're living in a situation where rainwater is your only option, then, you know, even the Shastra. Okay, that's interesting. Someone's scribbling on the slides. Okay. Next one. Okay, what do we avoid when we're doing Ācamana? So it talks about out of respect for spiritual activity, better you don't perform Ācamana with your head or throat covered, without wearing, you know, if you're not properly dressed, your cloth's not tucked in, etc. at the back. Also, without first washing your hands and feet. Generally, you should wash your hands and feet beforehand. And of course, you know, generally we've already done that because we normally would take bath before, you know, doing Ācamana. Yeah. And also, it's better to do it while sitting, as with most spiritual activities like chanting Gayatri, chanting Japa. These things are better done while sitting. And also sitting on shoes. Shoes are considered to be unclean. So if you're sitting on shoes, then you're also considered to be unclean. So better to avoid doing Ācamana in that circumstance. Yeah. And also it mentions here without with your knees or feet showing. So it's better when you sit down is you cover up your knees with your lower cloth and also your feet. It's actually, you know, considered to be disrespectful to have your feet showing. So yeah, that's just a few. Some of these are minor kind of guidelines, but they're given in Shastra. So just bring them up to your attention. Of course, like, you know, some of these things may not always be practical. For instance, for someone who, you know, is unable to sit cross-legged on the floor, for instance, they might do it sitting in a chair, or if they don't have that option, then obviously they're going to have to do it standing up. But if you can sit down on the floor, then it's better you do that. Yeah. Okay, so next thing I wanted to do to look at was the different types of Ācamana that you would have seen in ISKCON. So there's two basic types of Ācamana. Of course, there's many different types of Ācamana. There's, you know, Vaishnava Ācamana, there's Shaivite Ācamana. There's so many, you know, Tantric, Puranic, Vedic. You know, there's so many different types. But in ISKCON, we basically do two types, and they're both Vaishnava Ācamanas. But one is a basic Ācamana, which is what we'll be just demonstrating today. And then there's another one, which is the full or the Vaishnava Ācamana, which involves sipping water and also using different mudras to place the names of the Lord on the various parts of the body, such as the, you know, above and below the mouth, outside the either side of the nose, the eyes, the ears, the navel, the chest, and the head. And so, yeah, that's the different types of Ācamana. And of course, you know, if you're not very proficient or comfortable with doing these different types of procedures, then by all means just do the simple Ācamana. But if you know, for devotees who like doing rituals, who are more enthused with these types of things, then by all means do the full Ācamana. It's really up to what you feel comfortable doing. Yeah. All right. Now, there's an interesting. I did a bit of research a few years ago where I went through, Prabhupada's books. I did a database search, actually. And I found that he gives many different explanations of the word Achaman. For instance, sometimes Prabhupada will refer to Achaman as rinsing the mouth, or sometimes he'll say gargling, to rinse the mouth. Other times it's touching water. Now we can think of a very good example in the Bhagavatam is that in the first canto, where I think it might be chapter 9 or 10, where Ashvatthama, after he'd killed the sleeping sons of the Pandavas, that Arjuna took up the mission to capture and punish Ashvatthama, so he started to chase him. Then Ashvatthama, out of fear, released the Brahmastra to kill the Pandavas. And then so under Krishna's direction, Arjuna, he cast an arrow to counteract, or cast a Brahmastra to counteract Ashvatthama's Brahmastra. And it describes there how he touched water before he cast his astra. So this touching water is for purification, because we see in Vedic culture, purification is such an important part of the culture that, and you'll see, descriptions when they talk about, low class or uncultured people, they generally refer to them being as unclean. A cultured person is clean. So it's a very, very important element of our culture, Vaishnava culture, Vedic culture, whatever you want to call it. So touching water, very, very, very important. Then also sometimes you can see it in the Madhya Lila, for instance, referred to washing the hands and mouth, sometimes washing the feet and mouth, as I mentioned before, sometimes gargling. Sometimes also Prabhupada refers to Achaman as for refreshing the mouth. So there's a number of different meanings. And then if you look back at our article, sipping water for purification, you'll see that, these different activities that are mentioned there in the scriptures don't always necessarily mean that we have to sip water with mantra every time. It could simply mean as much as just rinsing the mouth when you rise from bed. It also could mean, just washing the hands. For instance, the second group, it says, it is also recommended to perform Achaman after rising from bed. So obviously you would rinse the mouth. After bathing, you would rinse the mouth. After dressing, you would rinse the mouth. After touching the lips, what's the point of rinsing your mouth? No, you'd wash your hands. Eating. After eating, you wash your hands, you wash your feet, you wash your face, you rinse your mouth. Going to an impure place, also you would, because the bad air will sit on your palate, so you rinse your mouth. Spitting or coughing, rinse your mouth and your lips. Yeah? Speaking improper words, rinse your mouth. Touching something impure, what's the point of rinsing your mouth if you touch something impure? No, you obviously would wash your hands. And returning from a journey, the common thing, like Prabhupada, whenever he went out on Purification in Vrindavan, when he came back, the first thing he'd do, he would wash his feet. Because the dust is there. Also, he'd rinse his mouth because the dust also was set on the palate, and he'd also wash his hands. So we can see, the practical application of these things. If you just understand what the word means, then you can see how to apply these things very easily. Okay, so you just want to look at different other methods that we see in other temples. For instance, I hope you recognize this beautiful deity. This is Ramandev from Vrindavan. Now, the pujaris there in Vrindavan, and not necessarily recommending this for ISKCON, but just so you can see that their pujaris also do perform activities for purification. But what they do there is they don't sip Achaman, they sip the Charnamrita of Ramanji and understand that they become purified by that. So that's also a valid way of purifying. But our acharyas, especially Srila Prabhupada himself, he would, whenever he went on the altar, he would sip simple Achaman. So therefore, following the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, we also do that. I hope you like the photo of Ramanji. It's very, very beautiful. Okay, and the next place I went to this place years ago. Very, very beautiful deity, very, very wonderful worship, and that is Nathaji in Nathdwar. Now, I remember there years ago watching the pujaris as they were doing the worship, and in front of the altar they have like this brazier which is full of glowing coals, And every time they need to purify themselves, they throw some powder on there and they wave their hands across the powder. I guessed what they were doing was using frankincense, because frankincense is known to have a purifying quality. So they wave their hands across that, and then they purify themselves like that. Okay, so now I've also seen sometimes devotees, because there's a description in Shastra how for a Brahmana that all the sacred rivers reside in the earlobe of the right ear. And sometimes you see devotees will do this to purify themselves, but not really, that'll be quite subtle. But also when you do Ācamana, you also want some element of the gross purification, the purification of water, but also by ingesting water which is infused with mantra, specifically the names of Krishna, then this is a very, very purifying act. And we know that verse, for anyone who's ever attended an initiation, this Om Apavitro Pavitro Va Savavastam Kato Viva Yasmanet Pundari Yaksha Sabaya Abhyantara Suchi, that whether one is purified or unpurified or having gone through all circumstances of life, if you simply remember the lotus-eyed Lord, Pundarikaksha, then you become purified within and without. So when we chant the mantras, or when we do Ācamana and we chant the mantras, we're remembering Krishna, and we're becoming purified by remembering the holy name. So very, very important element of purification. Okay, so how to do basic Ācamana. So the first thing you do is just sit on a proper sitting place, an asana. Ideally, you would use something like kusha. If you don't have kusha, which probably the biosecurity laws in Australia wouldn't allow you, and many other countries wouldn't allow you to take kusha there, then you could simply use some sort of pure fabric, such as wool, cotton, jute, silk, to sit on. If there's no sitting place, you can sit you kneel with your right knee on the ground, and you kind of sit on your foot, and then touch the floor on your left foot flat on the floor. Maybe I should actually put a video up on a demonstration of how to do this, just so those of you who want to learn how to do this can do that. But it's only necessary really when you don't have an asana. I mean, I generally, if I don't have an asana, I'll put my chadar on the ground and just sit on that. But because chadar's wool, so it's fine. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop this screen share and go to another screen share for a second. I'll come back to this one. I just have a video that I'd like to show you, and hopefully it's going to work. Okay, here we go. There's the video. Now let me go here. Now this is just something I put together the other day for all of you. Okay. Om Kejavaya Namaha. Om Narayana Namaha. Om Madhavaya Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram. Okay, so you could see that was pretty quick. That took all of 35 seconds. Yeah? So not very difficult to do, and it's something that we can all do. Yeah? So I would encourage you all to get onto our YouTube channel, ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry YouTube channel, and just look at that. Try to do it practice it in your own time. It's very, very simple. It only takes a few seconds. And as I mentioned, if you can't sit down, then stand and do it. It's not a problem. But things to like. This is a basic Ācamana cup here. I hope you can see that in the video. And a spoon. They need to be nice and clean. Yeah. And this one's made from bell metal, but you can get it's got a nice ring to it when you bang it. You can get them from brass. You can get them from copper, different things like that. But even like if you don't have that, you know, I've even used plastic cups and plastic spoons, you know, but the main thing is to use to do Ācamana, to sip water and to ingest the mantras. Of course, it is better if you can have a you know, one made of metal. You may have seen on the slideshow at the start, you can also use silver. In some temples in ISKCON, they have silver Ācamana cups. They're quite nice also. Okay, so then that's the that's the Ācamana. Now I just wanted to move on next to a little bit of a few practical points, if you like, about cleanliness at home. Now, cleanliness at home is very simple to maintain, and it doesn't need to be any different from what we do at the temple. Now, the first thing we want to look at is there's 6 basic divisions which are given in scriptures. The place where you're doing the worship needs to be pure. The articles you're using for the worship need to be pure. Your body needs to be pure. Your mind needs to be pure. Your mantra should be pure. And the deity you're worshiping should also be pure. Now, of course, the place is fairly simple. It just means wherever you're doing the worship should be clean. But also your home should be clean. Your home environment should be clean, because if your home environment is not clean, how's your consciousness going to be clean? They're all interrelated. The articles of worship, such as the paraphernalia used, the lamps, the plates, the trays, whatever it is you're using, they all need to be clean. Also refers to the items you're offering to the deity. They also need to be clean. The body, that means, you know, when you rise in the morning, you bathe, you put on clean clothes, tilak, etc. Chant your mantras at, you know, appropriate times. Mind, the mind becomes pure by thinking of Krishna and by chanting the holy name. Now, interesting one, mantra. I often ask devotees, you know, this one, what is the purity of mantra? And of course, they'll all say, you know, not always, but many devotees will say, oh, it means you chant the mantras properly, or different things like that. But, you know, it's kind of interesting in Kali Yuga is we're not very good at chanting mantras. And there's even one beautiful story where Jayananda came to Srila Prabhupada and was explaining that he wasn't sure if he was chanting the Gayatri mantra properly. So Prabhupada said, well, whisper it into my right ear and I'll tell you. So he chanted the Gayatri mantra into Srila Prabhupada's ear, and Srila Prabhupada, he laughed. He said, don't worry, you'll never get it. So this is the nature of Kali Yuga. These things, and the thing is, these things are not so important for us in Kali Yuga. Krishna's made concessions for us so that we can very easily progress in spiritual life. The main point with the purity of mantra is that we receive it from a bona fide spiritual master. And that way, as it says in Paparana, that way it will produce fruit. And of course, purity of deity, Krishna is always pure, but purity of deity means that the deity is clean. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a few basic points in terms, mostly focusing on purity of body, because this is the main one, I feel. So the first thing we can look at is, when do I need to bathe? Now, obviously, when you rise in the morning, you would bathe, but after going to the bathroom to pass stool, you would bathe. After going outside, you know, away from your ashram or whatever, you would need to bathe. Visiting an unclean place, after cutting your hair, after cutting your fingernails or toenails, after visiting a crematorium or seeing a dead body. Brahmanas are encouraged to take bath 3 times a day, but if that's not practical, at least in the morning and the night, try to take bath. And if that's not practical, at least in the morning. But if you're sick and bathing is going to make you sicker, then better you don't bathe. Then also, you know, when we go to the toilet to pass water, then we should rinse ourselves with water, you know, the private parts of water. And then also rinse the mouth. There's different injunctions in the Shastra given for rinsing the mouth. Sometimes it says 3 times, sometimes it says 10 times. Main thing is we rinse our mouth sufficiently so it removes all the food particles from the mouth. Very important. What cloth is clean? Pure cloth, like cotton, silk, jute, wool. Cloth that is freshly washed and not washed in a public laundry. Of course, if you don't have a washing machine at home, you can wash it in a public laundry, but this restriction is more that you shouldn't have what they have in, like, a public laundry in the West is different from a public laundry in India. Public laundry in India means you give your cloth to someone else and they wash it. but that's not acceptable because they're likely not clean. But if you wash it in the public laundry, that's fine. Cotton you can wear once, jute you can wear several times, silk you can wear many times before it becomes impure. Synthetics are never pure, and also they're highly flammable. So you need to be careful with synthetics. When this cloth needs to be washed, it needs to be washed after eating, after going to the bathroom in it, after wearing it outside, visiting a crematorium or any unclean place, or if you touch someone who's unclean, etc., you need to put on fresh cloth. Yeah. And then also, when should I wash my hands? Of course, we wash our hands after eating. We also rinse our mouth. And you'll see some devotees like Bhakti True Maharaj, etc. They'll also wash their feet. They'll also do Ācamana as well. Or after touching someone's dirty eating utensils or food remnants, we also need to purify ourselves. After putting the finger inside any of the gates of the body, for instance, if you touch your eyes, you put your finger in your nose, put your finger in your mouth, inside your ear, anything like that, you need to wash your hands. If you touch a broom or a dustpan, if you touch a toilet or a toilet brush or anything unclean, wash your hands. And actually, it's just good to be habituated to washing your hands. Okay, let me have a look here. Do I need to bathe after eating? In the scriptures, it's actually forbidden to bathe after eating, and especially for a Vaishnava, because we only eat Krishna Prasad, eating is actually purifying, so it's not necessary. Now, another one that a question we're often asked is it necessary to bathe after passing water? And the answer is no. But there's a nice letter from Prabhupada, not a letter, quote from Prabhupada. He gives in a Bhagavatam class in Los Angeles in 1975. He says, it means when you go to the toilet or the latrine, is you wash your legs with, he says originally it was with earth, but nowadays it's soap. So soap and water, you wash your legs once or twice with soap. This is called socham. Socham means purity. Yeah? Right, so let me see what else we've got here. Okay. I mean, we can talk a little bit about, there's also the environment of worship. The environment should be pure or clean, because otherwise the worship's not going to be effective. Therefore, we have to take care before the puja begins. Like when you start to do puja, you wipe the floor, and you could be chanting Hare Krishna while you're doing it, etc., like that. But you clean it properly and make sure it's properly cleansed. Same with the articles. The articles should be, all the articles we're using should be properly cleansed. If there's any thought of contamination, then they must be rejected. Also, when we're offering the articles of worship, be mindful of not mixing prasad and bhoga, because if an unoffered item comes into contact with an offered item, it doesn't become prasadam, but it becomes unofferable. So be mindful that when you're doing your worship, when you offer arati, next week after next we'll be showing arati. So you have all your unoffered items on the tray or on the altar, whatever, you offer the item to the Lord, then you put it aside so it's not mixing with the unoffered items. And then before you touch the unoffered items, you must purify your hand. And then also a common thing we see is that devotees sometimes they put articles of worship, such as the deity's clothes, garlands, things like that, on their lower cloth when they're sitting down. But actually the lower part of the body is considered impure, so better to avoid putting things you're going to offer to the Lord on the lower cloth. Okay, so I think we'll wind up there, and just wondering if anyone has any questions at all. Okay. How do we do Ācamana on Nirjala Ekadashi? We just do Ācamana. There's no restriction for that. You don't have to, because the thing is, you're not drinking water with the idea to satisfy the body. You're sipping the water with mantra, and the idea there is that you're. How do we do Ācamana on Nirjala Ekadashi? Hang on, I've got to. Just do Ācamana. There's no. Yeah. The idea is that you're sipping water for purification, not to be drinking anything or to satisfy the needs of the body. You're just trying to, purify yourself. So, yeah. Okay. What else we got here? Does Radharani apply Gopi Chandan tilak? Okay, not exactly related to purity. There is an interesting conversation from Prabhupada. He was talking with Banu Swami in Tokyo, I believe it was 1972, and Banu Swami, he wasn't Swami at that time, he was Banu Das. He asked him the same question, and Prabhupada said, no, just red dot. So Radharani just has a red dot. But the male deities of the Sampradaya will always wear the tilak of the Sampradaya. Okay, Vijay Baladev Prabhu, thank you for your questions. 2 questions. I've seen elderly devotees in our temple perform some different sort of procedure for Ācamana. They might be too old to learn the proper procedure of full Vaishnava Ācamana. Would it be better to tell them to rather just to do the basic Ācamana instead? My general approach to senior devotees, older devotees, is just let them do what they're doing. It's the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So better to just let them do what they know how to do and not try to force them to do something that they're not comfortable doing. It's I feel that one of the main things is rather to try to encourage people in deity worship rather than giving them too many rules and regulations which they might struggle with. And especially with older devotees, it's like, there's one devotee we have here, and he's a fantastic devotee. I really have a lot of respect and appreciation for him. Yet, whenever I listen to, I can't listen to him chant the mantras because it's just like, they're not the mantras that are there. He just, I'm not going to say anything to him, but he just can't pronounce the mantras. That's all it is to it. And he just pronounces his best approximation of it, and that's fine. Krishna, Bhava Grahi Janardana, Krishna accepts the intent. He accepts the intention of the worshipper. So if the worshipper is intending to please Krishna by his service, that's what Krishna accepts. Not whether or not he's chanting the mantras properly, not whether or not he's doing Ācamana properly. Krishna is not really bothered by that sort of stuff, and there's that wonderful story where, was it Uddhava? Was it Uddhava? Yeah, I think it was Uddhava. Invited Krishna to his home, and what happened was Uddhava was so happy that Krishna came to his home that he wanted to give him something to eat. So he ran inside and he got some bananas, and he's peeling the bananas, and he was so happy to see Krishna that he was throwing away the banana and giving Krishna the skin. And Krishna is showing how he accepts the love of the devotee over the ritual. He was eating the skin of the bananas. So this is a very nice story to demonstrate that Krishna is actually really interested in what's in the heart. Of course, if we have the capacity to do the ritual properly, then better we do, because that's also a demonstration of our love. Is that we're trying to do the procedures properly for the satisfaction of Krishna. Okay, it is common. This is Vijay Baladev's second question. It is common that in deity department in each temple there's a common Ācamana cup used for everyone. This cup is usually standing in an open place without cover, so dust can fall in it. So would it be better to always fill the cup with only a little water for single use, and then the person fills up again for themselves? This is a really important question, Vijay Baladev, especially in the current climate. I would suggest not just changing the water, but actually thoroughly washing the Ācamana cup. I generally use a scour, like a green nylon scour, to make sure the Ācamana cup is spotlessly clean. Use soap and water and wash it for at least 30 seconds with soap and water, because I saw some statistics coming out of one of the universities not statistics, some, test results coming from one of the universities in the USA, and they had analyzed different surfaces that coronavirus survives on, and don't quote me on the numbers, but I think metal was something like 2 days. So if you just put fresh water in, if there's a coronavirus germ sitting in that Ācamana cup, fresh water is not going to get rid of it. Cleanse it with water and soap, hot soapy water, for at least 30 seconds, because soap will destroy the virus. So yeah, and even if there wasn't any virus around, I do that anyhow. I clean the Ācamana cup and I put in fresh water every single time. It's what I learned when I got trained in Mayapur, they change the Ācamana cup every time. They wash the Ācamana cup every time. Yeah. So very, very important question, Prabhu. Thank you. Then we have Sonam Binyani. Hare Krishna. Can we wash chamra? Yes, I generally use shampoo suited for dry hair to wash chamras. And if you have conditioner, hair conditioner available, that's also really nice. It makes the chamras very, very beautiful. So yeah, wash them. In a temple where there's lots of smoke from incense and lamps and stuff, good to wash them weekly, but minimum when they get dirty. They should be washed fairly regularly. Pranesh Patel, is it necessary to wash your feet after eating or just hands and face? It's recommended in Shastra to wash their feet. And, you know, it's not as comfortable in the West, or, you know, usually it's not so easy to do because it means you got to lift your legs up in, you know, your feet up into the sink or something like that. But if you can wash your feet after eating, it's definitely better for you. Yeah. So yeah, I encourage you to do that. And bare minimum is try to wash your feet before going to bed. But you know, it's like you've got to apply yourself to the process of bhakti to a degree which is practical for you. We don't want to have you doing things which are just, you know, kind of think, oh, you know, I'm sick of all these rituals, I'm going to give up. No, that's not the point. Okay. Okay, Srinivas Prabhu has written, is offering bhoga in a little bowl and then mixing it to the main food item allowed? You can do that, but generally what they do is see, when you offer the bhoga, what you're considering is that, you know, because this is a portion of the other thing, it's got the same taste. It's not like the taste is different. Therefore, we understand that when we offer the small item, the other item is being offered as well. The same as when you know, for instance, someone gives you a watermelon, like a big watermelon, okay? And then you think, I'm going to cut a small piece out of the watermelon, I'll offer that to Krishna. And then every day I'll offer a piece of watermelon. But the Prabhupada explained, because the rasa is the same, the watermelon is offered. So, you know, it's better if you offer the whole, you offer one piece and understand the whole thing's offered. So it's the same when we offer bhoga, then you know, the whole item is considered offered. But what's on the plate of the deity, that's mahaprasadam. What's in the pot, that's prasadam. Yeah, the other thing is prasadam, but you know, so that's the difference there. How to wash legs after passing water when in an office or in long journeys? Probably not so practical, Sri Gopal. But you know, like, obviously, what, you know, the point I'm making here is that Srila Prabhupada uses the word socham. Socham means pure. So it means that if you're doing deity worship and you have to pass water, what happens is, especially, you know, in the environment where you squat, is small droplets, like tiny droplets of urine, will sprinkle onto your legs. So all you need to do is, because like with stool, according to the Vishnu Smriti, I think it's in, that when stool contacts the body, you have to bathe. But when urine contacts the lower part of the body, simply water is enough. Water and soap is enough to purify after that. So it's not necessary to bathe after passing water, but you just wash the lower part of the body with soap and water. And but of course, when you're traveling, when you're at the office, at work, or whatever, it may not be practical. So, you know, devotional service needs to be practical, and that was one of the things that was really nice about Srila Prabhupada's approach to devotional service, is his practicality. Is it necessary to mix pipe water with water from the Ganges for the purpose of doing Ācamana? No, you don't need to do that. If you have Ganges water at home, then you can certainly put a few drops of Ganges water in if you like, and that just, you know, it makes it pure, but also for your consciousness, you're feeling that the water is pure, so it's quite good to do that. Thank you for that, Vishal. Then Devananda Prabhu, in terms of cleaning articles, How do we clean deity clothes? What is recommended ways for cleaning deity clothes, washing or dry cleaning? I certainly wouldn't do dry cleaning, because generally when they do dry cleaning, they often use alcohol. Usually devotees don't wash deity clothes very much. They're usually made from pure items. And also, once they've been offered to the deity, because they come in touch with the deity's body, they're considered to be transcendental. So we don't need to wash them as such. But of course, if they get dirty, you get something stuck on them, you can very carefully remove the dirt from the clothes, but generally they're not washed. Okay, back to Facebook questions. Just want to know how many after wearing silk or jute, should you change it, or we just use our intelligence? The way I determine it is like, when cloth is freshly washed and dried, it has a fresh feeling to it. It feels clean. Because in the Shastra, in the Hari Bhakti Vilasa, actually, it mentions that cotton you use once and you wash it. Jute you can wear several times. So usually 2, 3, 4 times jute, it'll start to feel a bit limpid. And silk, generally I find after 3 or 4 days, if you haven't worn it anywhere impure, if you haven't eaten in it, if you haven't been to the bathroom in it, you haven't been outside in it, anything like that, then generally, 3, 4 days, it still feels fresh, so it's still okay to use. And even I remember, years ago, I used to put the deities to bed at night, and then I'd wake them up in the morning. So, and in those days, I wore cotton more often. I would wear the cotton at night, then I'd put it somewhere clean, and go take bath, etc., like that, and then I would wear the same cotton cloth in the morning for the worship in the morning. So it's important that it should keep clean. Okay, Prema Priya Devi Dasi is asking, is it necessary for Mataji's to wash their hair after passing stool or having oil in their hair before serving deities? According to scripture, the ladies would wash that. It's recommended they bathe only up to the neck, because generally speaking, men don't have hair or have very short hair, whereas ladies will tend to have longer hair. And to have that, wet, cold hair on your head in the wintertime will can cause you to be sick. So according to the scriptures are very practical. And according to the scriptures, ladies don't normally wash their hair. But when you're going through your menses, after the flow of the menses is stopped, then the next day you wash your hair, and then you're considered pure. Yeah? So generally you would only wash your hair after the menses. Yeah? And you oil it before you wash it, to help it stay fresh. Why does Radharani stand on left side? There is some mention in the scriptures about the, what's the term they use? Sorry, I've forgotten the Sanskrit term. But because she's the energy of the Lord, then generally she stands on the left side. You'll see the same with Sita Thakurani. Sita, she stands on the left side of Ram. Whereas you'll see with it's not the energy, it's the consort. Sorry, it's the consort stands on the left-hand side. And you'll see also, when you look at Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, is that Subhadra is on the right side of Jagannath. But usually his wife or his consort is on his left side. You'll also see the same, it's a cultural thing. You'll also see the same thing when we do a wedding yagya, is when the bride comes in, she's standing or sitting on the bridegroom's right-hand side. And then, but after some part of the ceremony, then she sits on, when they're considered married, she then sits on the left-hand side. So it's quite a traditional thing. I don't know much more about it than that. Okay, Akashani Radhika Devi Dasi. How many times can we use the same dress to do the worship? Like, for example, I live from the temple, I use a sari only for puja. Is there a minimum standard to use the same dress? Well, I was explaining that before. If it's cotton, you would use it once. If it's jute, 3 or 4 times. If it's silk, and if you keep it clean, that's the point. You can use it for several days. 3 or 4 days. Akanda Harinam Prabhu. he's asking about how many days to do seva again after someone has left the body in the family. So there's a lot of different views on this. I remember a few years ago having a conversation with Sri Prabhu, and he about this topic, and he produced a reference from the Manu Samhita, and basically it was talking about that, you know, if you're not affected by the death, then, you know, it doesn't interfere with your worship. Because, and this is commonly the case with Vaishnavas, because with a Vaishnava, we've dedicated our life to serving Krishna. So we're not so concerned about these things, or we try to be, you know, not so concerned about these things which are connected with the body. And you know, if someone passes in the family, it's connected with the body. So we're not so disturbed by that. But if you are disturbed by that, then it's better that you don't do the worship, because rather than thinking about Krishna or the deity you're worshipping, you'll be thinking about the dearly beloved who's departed. Because at the start of worship, there's a whole process, which is also part of the purification process, where we'll start off by doing what they call dhyan mantra. You know, you do all the external purifications, you purify all the items of worship and things like that. And then you do dhyan mantras. Dhyan means to meditate or to kind of absorb yourself in thoughts of something, to remember. So the first element of the dhyan is to remember the Dham. Then the second element of the dhyan is to remember the person who you're worshipping there in the Dham. So if you're absorbed in the death of some dearly beloved in the family, you can't do that. So then you can't do worship. So better, you know, if you are affected by the death, then better you avoid worship. But, you know, if we're you know, steady sadhakas in devotional service, generally you'll find that these things, you know, it's a little disturbing, but not so much, because we understand we're not the body, the soul is eternal, etc. So it shouldn't really be so much disturbing to us. Radha Shalini Mataji, she asks, after how many days of your menses should you go on the altar? I've heard different rules from different people. Initially, Srila Prabhupada, you know, understanding the temperament of his early female disciples, he just gave a rule 3 days. But it's different for different people. Sometimes the menstrual flow is going on quite short, maybe 1 day, you know, for some people. Other people, it's longer. So we really need, you know, it really needs to be a what do you call it, a case-by-case situation. As long as the flow is there, then the body's considered contaminated. When the flow stops, the next day you bathe, then you're considered pure, you can go on the altar. And you wash your hair, as I mentioned before. So yeah, there's lots of different views on that, I know, but yeah, you've got to be practical. Okay. Now, Ananda Leela sent, Ananda Leela Mataji from Mayapur sent a nice reference here. The word Krittashita Snanam appears here. According to Smriti Shastra direction for daily duties, ladies are allowed to bathe daily up to the neck. The hair on the head does not necessarily have to be washed daily because the mass of wet hair may cause a cold. For ladies, therefore, taking a bath up to the neck is ordinarily prescribed, and they take a full bath only on certain occasions. On this occasion, Devahuti took a full bath and washed her hair very nicely. When a lady takes an ordinary bath, it is called mala snan. Mala means impurity. And when she takes a full bath, including the head, it is called shila snan. At this time, she needs sufficient oil to smear on her head. That is the direction of the commentators of Smriti Shastra. And that's from the Bhagavatam 3:23-31. So, and also, as she's mentioning there, as Ananda Leela Mataji is mentioning there, also on special occasions like festivals, you might want to, you know, ladies might want to bathe and wash their hair on a festival, you know, because their hair often looks much nicer. And you know, usually with the oils they rub on their hair, they're scented, they're fragrant, so it also smells nice. So festivals, weddings, things like that. But that's like a you know, a naimitic or occasional thing, but as a regular thing, after the menses is finished, then you'll do it the next day. Okay, so very wonderful. Thank you all very much for your participation and your very, very thoughtful questions. Really appreciate these questions and helping us all to understand more deeply the process of deity worship and bhakti. And then next week, we'll be doing bog offering. And between now and then, I'll work on producing a fairly simple video on how to offer Bulgar. I'll just do it here at our home altar and shoot it on my phone. So hopefully you like that. And so we'll go over bulk offering. We'll discuss the different aspects of bulk offering. And of course, with bulk offering, I'm sure you're going to have many, many questions about, can I offer this? Can I offer that? Does this work on equality? Can I offer this on equality? There's so many different questions generally with the bulk offering. But I will be uploading some more files for you. So some really nice quotes from Srila Prabhupada on cleanliness and purity. Also, the article about sipping water for purification. Also, another article about the 6 divisions of purity, which come from scriptures. So there's quite a few nice quotes there, and also some information I think is there from Bhakti Charu Maharaj. So hopefully you'll get a chance to read them. Please visit our YouTube channel. There's lots of interesting videos there. And of course, also join our Facebook group, ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry. Okay, so thank you all very much for kindly participating in this, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to spend some time with you next week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhupada.